In this podcast, Christine Petersen will focus on how our bodies and our minds work and give you various tips and tricks, tools and techniques for understanding yourself, being happier in yourself, and living a better life. Every week, we will discuss different topics that might interest you and help you think differently to then change the way you approach life and yourself. In this podcast, Christine Petersen will focus on how our bodies and our minds work and give you various tips and tricks, tools and techniques for understanding yourself, being happier in yourself, and living a better life. Every week, we will discuss different topics that might interest you and help you think differently to then change the way you approach life and yourself. Hello, Julie. How are you today?
Hello, Christine. I'm fine. What about you?
I'm very well. Thank you. I'm looking forward to today's talk.
Yes, me too, as usual. So tell us what we are going to talk about today.
Well, today we're going to talk about time. We're going to talk about how to be more organized and how to use your time better and more effectively.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about why this is so important. What we're going to do about interruptions, how to plan, how to schedule, how to organize your time, and how to set your priorities and goals. In fact, time is a constant. We have 24 hours a day or 1,440 minutes. That sounds like a lot. Yeah. However, we also have a bit of sleep and other things. So that's it every day. And sometimes, of course, we feel that time goes really fast. I'm sure you've had that feeling where time just disappears.
Definitely.
And other times it feels like seconds are creeping by.
Mm-hmm.
And an interesting thing is we can't control time itself. We can only control what we do with our time, how we manage ourselves in the time we have, and our attitude to time.
Okay, so it's very interesting topics, and I'm looking forward to having all the details. And to start, can you tell us why is it so important to be a master of time management?
Well, it's really important because there are a lot of benefits of good time management. The first benefit actually is stress relief.
Mm-hmm.
If we make and follow a task schedule, it will reduce our anxiety and our stress. Also, it gives us more time. So if we're managing our time well, then we're spending less time on the things we're doing, and that gives us extra time to spend on other things. It also gives us more opportunities. So if we manage our time well, we get more opportunities to do different things, and we waste less time on trivial, unimportant activities. And finally, it allows us to realize our goals. In fact, people who practice good time management can better achieve their goals and objectives, and they do so in a shorter amount of time.
Mm-hmm. You often spoke about being aware of what's going on. So can you tell us what we should take, or we should look at what kind of time wasters?
Yeah, the things that waste time are, and in fact, you're absolutely right. It's all about awareness, as I constantly say.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of things that will waste your time is attempting too much, trying to do too many things at any one time. If you're trying to multitask too much and do too many things, then you're ending up not spending enough time on each thing, and then you get lost and you end up actually wasting your time. Another time waster is not being able to say no. So if you say yes to everything, you're going to end up with so many things to do and not enough time to do it. There's a really interesting book by an author called Ken Blanchard. It's called The 1 Minute Monkey Meets the The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. I'll have to get this right. The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey by Ken Blanchard. And it's a book about how to manage tasks and activities. So if we think of monkeys as being activities, then we have to make sure we don't take all the monkeys on our back, all the activities, all the tasks, that the right person has the right monkey. This is a very, very lovely little book that you might enjoy reading. I'm going to, of course, put the information, the details of this book in the podcast description. So it's a matter of not having all the monkeys on our back, making sure we distribute the monkeys to the right person. Another time waster is that of having incomplete information. If I give you half the information that you need to complete the task, then you're going to spend a lot of time, waste a lot of time trying to find which bits of information you're missing. So a good trick is to try, if you ask somebody to do something, then give them all the information they need. Or if they ask you to do something, make sure you ask them for all the relevant information so you're not wasting time during the activity. Another time waster is failing to delegate. If you don't know how to delegate properly, then you have too many monkeys on your back. You've got too many things to do, and you probably won't be able to get everything done. This you'll see if the people who stay very, very late at work every day, the people who are super stressed, tend to, maybe they don't have anybody to delegate to, maybe they don't know how to say no, or they can't say no. Maybe they just don't know how to delegate. So that is something to look at and be aware of. And another one is management by crisis or firefighting. If we're constantly in a firefighting mode, so we're living from moment to moment and acting from moment to moment, then we're going to be wasting a lot of time putting out a lot of small fires or solving a lot of small problems that maybe we could have foreseen and avoided in the first place. And finally, another time waster is that of interruptions. So if you're at work and people are constantly interrupting you, well, then that's going to be stopping you from doing the task that you are asked to do. And when you then get back to it, your brain needs a certain amount of time to concentrate and focus again on the task. And there you would be wasting time. So just on the interruption part, of course, we know that if nobody asked us any questions, we probably wouldn't have. Maybe if you're working in an open space, you can arrange your desk so that it's a bit more difficult for people to just drop by. Some people work in an open space office, and there, of course, it's difficult to avoid people to drop in and start interrupting you. One of the things that some people do is use earphones, big earphones that people can see, that when I'm wearing my earphones, it means that I really don't want to be interrupted. Now, of course, you then have to also maybe not wear them sometimes so that people can interrupt you. And that becomes a very clear signal. If you do have your own office, then try and close the door. Of course, this has been very difficult during the COVID time, where a lot of people have been working from home, with partners working from home, with kids around. It's been extremely difficult to manage interruptions. And we've seen that on some of those video clips that have been circulating with various children and animals running through the room. So as people have been in meetings. And basically, if you really don't want to be interrupted, if you're doing something really important and you don't want to waste time in any way, then if all fails, then try and hide. Get into your closet, close the door, go to the bathroom, or find an office space or a meeting room that you can close the door and just to get this the work done, that particular task done you need to do.
Mm-hmm. I think it's so important in our ultra connected world to have to manage these interruptions. So thanks for the tips. So once we manage this, what can we do also as to plan or to see a little bit forward what's going to happen?
In fact, this is this thing of the opposite of firefighting. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and avoid as many mistakes or problems as possible by planning ahead and scheduling our time properly. We know that we can't create time, we can't manage it as such, we can just use the time in the best way we can, and that would mean planning for the time we have and scheduling our tasks at the right time. Now, just to define what these terms mean, planning defines what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And scheduling defines when and who is doing the task. So one little trick, of course, is to plan. So decide on the what and the how before you schedule, before you decide on the when and the who. A good trick is to use standard checklists if you can. If it's something you do frequently, then have a standard checklist. If it's some new task or new activity, then make sure you are using checklists or agenda or some form of a to-do list so that you don't forget anything. When we're younger, our memories are pretty good and we think we can remember everything. As we then have more and more things happening and maybe getting a bit older, then we find that we do need to start writing things down more in order to not forget. And then, of course, it becomes a problem because then we run out of time to do things. Now, there are, of course, different tools that you can use online and on your phone. One useful one is Trello, or another task management tool. A couple that I've found that are interesting, one is ClickUp, there's Quire, Q-U-I-R-E, and there is Todoist. Of course, there's loads more. I don't want to start naming all of them. Again, we will put the list of these on the notes in the podcast.
Okay, thank you. And it's so important when we're talking about scheduling, because I know that I used to do lots of long, very task lists, and then I didn't have enough time to do that, and I was always running after time. So scheduling is the thing.
Is the thing, and not to put everything, I think we've spoken about this before, not to put everything on the same date. Don't put your whole to-do list for today. You'll just go back to bed, I think, give up. Try and spread the tasks over the weeks ahead, so that you do things, what you can do in the day.
Yes, so important.
Yes.
So speaking of this, how can we decide on deadlines?
Well, one of the things we could do is we have our deadlines, and of course we need to use our checklists. So one way of doing this is using your commuting time to complete your coordination tasks or to create your checklists. So for example, in the morning, if you are commuting, would be to then look at the day's schedule ahead, look at your to-do list and see if it's complete for the day, and maybe move things around. I can't do this today, I'll put it into tomorrow. And when you then do start your day, your working day, then try and start it with some structured me time. Have the first half hour of the day with no meetings, just yourself, to spend some time gearing up for the day and getting your mind into focus on what's going to be happening that day and what are the challenges of the day and how you're going to do them. It's a little bit of planning and organizing your day, and it allows you to then schedule even further what you're going to do that day. Now, another trick would be to, if you've got a big problem or a big project, then chop it up into smaller chunks, into smaller pieces. And if you have a little piece of work to do, you have a little task that you've got that will take you 2 to 5 minutes, well, just do it. Don't spend the time writing it up as a task. It's going to take you longer to write as a task to actually do the task. So just do it. If you've got repetitive tasks, make absolutely sure you have checklists. That will reduce errors. A good example is airplane pilots. When they get onto their plane, they've got standard checklists that they have to go through before they can start the engines or start flying the plane. And that will just reduce the errors that we might have. And then as you do the task, then either delete the task from your list or cross off the tasks. That also gives a fantastic sense of satisfaction. Gives you a little dopamine shot, which we all need once in a while. And when you have a new task, then put it in your calendar or your to-do list, task list straight away, and put it in on the earliest date you can start the task. Some people put the task in on the day it's due, on the end date. Now, this is going to cause a problem because, of course, you won't see it until the day it's due, and then it's already late.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to stress you out. So put the task in the earliest day you can start, and then you can, of course, also say when it's due. You can put that date in as well so that you know.
Okay, great. So what about organization? Do you have special tips to share with us?
Absolutely. I'd like to talk about two types of organization: the physical organization of your environment and the mental organization, of your brain. So let's start off with the physical organization. The physical clutter you have, the physical things, make sure that you follow the rule, a place for everything and everything in its place. So group things together, put all the pens in one place, put all the erasers in another place, put all the paper in another place. Make sure that you know exactly where you have things so you're not wasting time looking for things. And when you use the things, put them back in the place that they belong to. Do it immediately or as soon as you can so that you don't end up with a very cluttered desk. One trick, of course, is touch papers once. So if you've got papers, try and deal with them quickly. Touch them once, deal with them, put them away or delete them. Of course, now in a digital world, it's more of a document situation. Again, the same thing applies, the same rule applies. If you've got a document or an email, try and deal with it once only and put it away or delete it or hand it over to somebody else once you've dealt with it. Try and keep your desk as clear as possible with piles, of course, of papers where you know exactly what's in each pile. Make lists and make absolutely sure you have what we call a pending folder or a pending area of your desk where you put things that are still pending, that are still outstanding. Now, for all the digital clutter we've got on our PCs, once in a while, just go through your PC and look at all the unused programs that you have and delete them. And also the unused files. Maybe you don't have to delete them because you never know. You can put them into a folder called old. Try and clean up your PC landing page. So the front page on your PC, try and have not too many things on it because then it becomes difficult to find them. And make sure that you've got a really good filing system for all your folders so that you can find things really easy. You should be able to find everything on your PC within about a minute.
Okay.
And make sure that you've got a really effective filing and naming system of your files. So if we move to the mental organization skills allow you to process information quickly. It allows you to translate your thoughts to clear and articulate communication and focus on the fine details correctly. Mental organization can also apply to the way you use tools and strategies to help you in your mental tasks. So a couple of things you can do is, the first is understand where your time is being spent. What happens during the day? How do you spend your time? And is this the way you want to spend your time? Also, try and set some healthy limits on the time you spend planning. Some people get so caught up in planning that they don't have any time to spend actually doing.
Mhm.
So you also set some goals and outline the steps you need to take to reach them. So we all need goals, we all have goals. And if you just have one big goal, then it's very difficult to get started. So as soon as you break it down into smaller tasks and steps, then it starts to become achievable. And finally, one good trick is to keep a notebook with you to jot down ideas. Personally, I don't use a notebook, I use my phone.
Mhm.
And I will put ideas in my phone as I have a certain notebook area of my phone where I can then jot down any ideas that I come up with that I don't want to forget.
Okay. And what about your calendar? How do you use it?
Yeah, the calendar, that's a big one. The first thing is make sure that you've got a calendar that shows both the calendar, your days, and your tasks, to make sure that you see the tasks above the day. So you see everything on one page. Because if you're going to be moving between a calendar application and a task application, then you're going to forget things. As soon as you get a meeting or a new task, as soon as you know about it, then add it to your calendar or your to-do list. And if the task is too big, then break it into manageable parts. Make it into smaller parts, and try not to put all the tasks on the same day. So spread your tasks over the weeks or the months ahead. And as we said, add the task on the date you can start the task. And also, if it's a really important task that you don't want to be late on, then make an earlier deadline for yourself and put that in the calendar so that you're sure that you won't be late on this particular task. You may also want to write dates for follow-up in your calendar. For example, if you send an email to somebody to ask them to do something, you might put a little note in your calendar to say, next week, to say, I'm going to follow up with this person to see where they are at, what's the status of this task. Build in also some meetings with yourself. Make sure that you don't have wall-to-wall meetings all day or activities all day. Have some free time for yourself, which allows you to think, to dream, to be creative, and to spend time, of course, planning and scheduling as well.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that in your calendar you have not just the work tasks and activities, you also have your personal tasks and activities, so that you don't forget things. I once met a person who were extremely stressed and really had major problems managing their lives, their working, or actually their whole lives, and their calendar and everything. And it turned out they had one calendar for their personal lives and one for the work life, and they didn't overlap. So they had to go and look at two different calendars, and they would keep forgetting things.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if you don't see it in front of you, you're going to forget it. So try and have everything on the same page, everything in the same calendar, and just have one single master calendar.
Super. I love the meeting with myself.
Yes.
And I think in Zoom time, it's so important. Otherwise, you can just have one meeting after the other.
Yes,
so,
you're right. Yeah, you zoom out, dear me.
Exactly. And you also mentioned this meeting with yourself to start the day.
Yes.
So how should we start the day to really feel in touch, or really mastering our time perfectly?
Perfectly is a really big word.
Yeah, but after all these tips, I think it's going to be okay.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think we'll aim for perfection. Absolutely. So I said that it's a good idea to have me time the first half hour when you get to work, or when you get to your desk, or when you start your job, whatever your job is. You could even prolong the time from half an hour to an hour, maybe even 2 hours, depending on what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Try not to schedule meetings for this time, this half hour, 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. Schedule meetings with yourself, but with nobody else, and start doing the most important work of the day. So you've already looked at your task list, you already see what needs to be done. Get the most important things done right up front. And especially because then you're fresh, hopefully your brain is fresh, you're focused, and you can do a good job. And especially one nice trick is do the things you don't want to do first.
So I think it's called eat the frog first.
Eat the frog first. Yeah,
you know, as a French, I have to say, I have to use this expression.
You have to use that. Absolutely, you have to use that expression. I love that. Eat the frog first. Yes. So do the things you don't want to do. And if you are a procrastinator and you've got a whole list of things that you haven't done because you don't feel like doing them, then put them in a different color in your calendar so you can see them, or in your task list. And then do one or two of those things every morning. Do them first. And you're going to feel great for the rest of the day because they're done.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what about priorities? How do you manage them?
Priorities are really important because some people have problems with priorities. They put everything as being important. Now, Roosevelt, the president of the United States, he created a very well-known matrix where you look at, it's called urgent, important matrix. And we, on the one side, we see what is important, more important or less important. And then on the other side, what is urgent and not urgent. So here we create 4 boxes. So we have the things that are urgent and important. These we consider as being problems. They have to happen and they have to happen now, and they're important. Now, these are things like crises, deadlines, critical meetings. Then we have what is important, however, not urgent. And these are things we consider, we call them preparation. So this could be things like doing our planning, do our strategy, creativity, our thinking time, and some relaxed time. The third box of the matrix are things that are urgent, however, they're not important. And these are what we call deviations. These will be the extra interruptions, the silly emails that, well, maybe not silly, they need to be answered immediately, however, they're not important. And they're deviating us from our important work, and some meetings, of course, and some phone calls. And finally, we've got the 4th box, which is things that are not urgent and not important. And we call these distractions. So these are the fun projects, the coffee breaks, the extra coffee breaks, and perfectionism. If we have to be perfectionist, we're going to end up spending a lot of time on the last 5% of a task. Now, mainly what we should try and aim for is to have at least 50% of our time in what we call the preparation box, the things that are important but not urgent, and not urgent. And that will allow us to be on top of things, to be preparing and planning properly and doing things without the stress of doing them, without the urgency. Now, just a question, Julie. Urgent and important. What's the difference?
Between urgent and important?
Yes.
So the difference for me would be urgent has to be done quickly or urgently, like in the days to come. And important, it would really have an impact on your job or on what you're doing or your career or anything.
Absolutely, absolutely. Is everything important also urgent?
No.
No. Is everything urgent also important?
No.
No. So we really need to differentiate these two. And unfortunately, some bosses feel that everything that's important is also urgent. So we need to maybe educate our bosses to have the 4 different boxes. And of course, on Google or on internet, you can find this matrix, the urgent important matrix, if you want to get more detail about it.
I do love this matrix, and I do need to use it very regularly because I think it's easy to fall into the trap of urgent, important, and everything. So
I agree. I totally agree.
Good.
Yes.
Very good tool.
Yes.
So, and now could you tell us more about goal setting? Because I think it's also another important topic. It
is extremely important to set goals, yes. Now, the most important thing is the goals that we set ourselves must be goals that motivate us. So we have to find a motivator, a reason for doing the goal that is interesting to us and that gives us a motivator. We want also to make sure that when we're setting goals, we're setting SMART goals. Do you know the specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound SMART goals? Yeah, we all know those by now. We want to set goals in writing. Write your goals down. If they're not written down and they're only in your head, it's like they don't really exist enough. They're not tangible enough. And once you've set your goal, then I suggest that you make an action plan on how to achieve it. So make a goal, make sure you know the why of the goal, so the motivator, and make sure the why is interesting, and then create an action plan. How are you going to achieve your goal? And finally, stick with your goal. Try and make sure that the goal has an end date, because we know what happens if we've got goals with no end date.
We know.
Yeah, they stay goals. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, so that's a very important part of managing your time, is making sure that you are setting the right goals in the right way.
Wonderful. So again, Christine, thank you so much for all these important and interesting tips. What is your favorite thing to do? My
favorite tip is to make sure that I have all my tasks written down so I don't forget anything, that I prioritize properly, and that I take a break between tasks and activities to give me. Yes, that's
so
really important.
I'm going to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine, and hope to talk to you soon then.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I hope you enjoy the tips and tricks we talked about today.
Definitely. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. You've been listening to A Toolkit. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. You've been listening to A Toolkit for a Better Life with Christine Petersen and Julie Charef. For more information and details on how to contact us, please see the podcast description.